In this video, I'm going to show you how to get to a point where women are throwing themselves at you and offering you casual sex pretty much all the time. This now happens to me whenever I go out. I'm not the most handsome guy or the tallest or anything, but I have girls approaching me pretty much like clockwork and all but begging me to take them home. And yet this is not a situation that I really created intentionally. It's actually been a side effect of a certain occult system of self-development that I've been practicing since I was 22 years old. This is a system based upon the teachings of a man called George Gurdjieff, who was a sort of Russian wizard and a mystic in the early 20th century, not entirely unlike Rasputin. Gurdjieff was considered to have an extraordinarily magnetic personality. He could hypnotize people at will. He appeared to have certain psychic powers. He was even accused of using black magic on people. And much like Rasputin, he had sex with a staggering number of women. And I found, as a result of practicing Gurdjieff's system, that I did indeed almost inadvertently develop this strange animal magnetism to women who now practically follow me through the streets wherever I go. And I'm obviously exaggerating there a little bit. I'm not claiming that every woman is attracted to me, far from it, but I do have multiple hot women approaching me every single night I go out. I can get laid very, very easily anytime I want to, despite not using dating apps, not having any social media. And so in this video, I'm going to show you what I did to achieve this result. And it all comes down to 3 occult laws that make you magnetic to women, all derived from Gurdjieff's ideas from his system, which he called the 4th way. Now, I said that this is going to be about getting casual sex, how to meet women, how to attract women, but this video is going to be very, very different from any other pickup girls or attraction type of video you've ever seen, because if you watch other content about this stuff, it's generally all very, very shallow and superficial kind of advice, like you have to learn to be better at conversation. So here are 5 funky conversation tips to spice things up with your crush. Guys, it's all about investing in a good cologne. I can't emphasize enough how much us ladies love a guy who smells good. And I'm not going to be talking about anything like that over the course of these 33 minutes. What I'm going to be talking about here, all I am going to be talking about is death. Life is about death. And the secret to a better life, the secret to a real life, is to prepare for a better death. Everything comes from death. Death is the meaning of life. Gurdjieff's system of self-development is fundamentally about death. It is about preparing for death, and it is about building something within yourself that can survive and outlive and outlast the inevitable death of your physical body. Gurdjieff's system, in other words, is a vehicle. It is a method for overcoming death and for achieving conscious, personal immortality. Now, what on earth could that have to do with getting casual sex or with becoming more attractive to women? Well, it will become more clear as we go on, but the long and short of it is that the qualities that you must develop in yourself in order to survive death, the qualities you have to develop in order to build what in Tibetan Buddhism they call the diamond body. This is an invincible vehicle that allows you to survive the death of your physical body. Well, it just so happens that the qualities you need to build in yourself to create this diamond body happen to be those which give you a high degree of animal magnetism to women. And I realize that sounds very, very strange and unlikely. It's not clear on the surface why those two things should go together, but it will become more apparent why this is the case as we go on. So Gurdjieff's system is fundamentally a method for attaining immortality, for achieving life after death, which Gurdjieff says is possible, but is not guaranteed, let alone is it common. And this is where his system departs from the most popular metaphysical systems and ideas, in that, most people say the soul is either immortal or it's not. And Gurdjieff says it's more complex than that. It's all relative, according to him. He says that the soul of an ordinary man is not immortal. He says that ordinary people, in effect, do not have a soul. It's not something you're born with. It's not something we can take for granted, but it's something you can build. Almost nobody ever actually does. And it takes extraordinary efforts and sacrifice and willpower to create what he calls a soul. The vast majority of people will not do this. They do not have souls, nor will they ever build one. And so in death, we are simply extinguished and annihilated almost immediately. Now, this may not happen all at once. The latent soul of a person might hang around for a few hours or a few days, hence certain people's accounts of near-death experiences. But very shortly after our body dies, our consciousness decays, it dissolves into the ether because there's nothing to hold it together. There's no glue. It's not compact enough. It's really just a disparate combination of conflicting impulses, thoughts, memories. And so very shortly after the physical body shuts down, the consciousness also evaporates, and then you're just nothing. And so Gurdjieff says that this is the rule. This is how it will be for us by default if we continue going along the way we've been going. There is no life after death for us. There is no heaven or hell. There's just nothing. However, it is possible, Gurdjieff says, to build a soul and to make that soul you have built immortal, invincible, invulnerable, independent, differentiated, distinct, so that it is capable of withstanding and resisting all external conditions, forces, and claims made upon it, up to and including even the claims of death itself. But in order to do this, we have to awaken. And so this is Gurdjieff's second main axiom, that men, human beings, are asleep. We are asleep, we are unconscious, we are in a kind of hypnotic trance throughout almost all of our so-called waking hours, and it is precisely because we are asleep that when we die, nothing whatsoever will survive of us. It's also why we can't get what we want in life. We don't have enough willpower. We don't have enough self-discipline, enough courage, whatever it is. All of this is because we are asleep. And so Gurdjieff's entire system of personal development, his entire system of what he calls awakening, it begins from this premise that immortality is possible, but that it is rare. Vanishingly rare, that practically no one will attain it, and that includes many of those who work and sacrifice and maybe even dedicate their entire lives trying to attain it. So the question that emerges next is, how do we awaken? How do we build a soul? How do we build within ourselves this quote unquote something that will survive the death of our physical body, and which also gives us these other powers we are concerned with having, such as magnetism, self-discipline, will, and so on. And Gurdjieff is again totally unique among all metaphysical teachers in that he says that this something you have to build, which we can roughly just call your soul, it is an entirely physical thing. It is material. There is no metaphysics in Gurdjieff. There is no spiritual world. There is no such thing as spirituality itself. It's a nonsense term according to him. There is nothing that exists apart from physical matter. He is a radical materialist. And he says that the soul is made from actual physical substances. Substances that we can and must collect in our physical body over the course of our lives. Gurdjieff calls these substances food, but he doesn't mean food in the sense of a sandwich or a banana or something, although that is included in what he calls food. He really means by this word food all forms of nourishment that build and contribute to the maintenance of a man's body, but also if there is enough surplus of this nourishment left over that can contribute to building his soul. And so Gurdjieff defines food as being composed of three things. The first is the normal physical food and water that we eat and drink. The second is the air we breathe. And the third is what he calls our impressions. And this last form of food, impressions, is the most difficult to explain, but this basically refers to everything we see, hear, touch, taste, feel with our sense organs. It's our sensory experiences, in other words. And this is actually a very subtle form of food for us, a form of nourishment, just as food is, just as air is, just as water is. And so food and bodies and souls and everything else in Gurdjieff's system is all material. It's all matter. But he categorizes different levels of matter according to its density and its frequency or vibration. And this is how he's able to reconcile talking about spiritual or supernatural things with being a radical materialist. And so, for example, something like the air we breathe is less dense than the food we eat. And because it's less dense, it also has a higher vibration. Density is inverse to vibration. And then something like a thought or an emotion or a sensory experience, that's even less dense than air, and therefore carries with it an even higher vibration still. And so Gurdjieff essentially is able to categorize everything that exists and everything that can exist according to this scale of density and vibration. And the soul, or these other things that science cannot see or cannot prove, is simply said to have such a low density or high vibration, to be made of such a fine materiality, in other words, that we can't perceive it. And so this is what Gurdjieff says the soul is made of, assuming that a man has one. It is made of very refined, higher vibration materials that a man has accumulated within himself through a certain process, through following these three occult laws that I'm going to get into. And once you collect enough of these materials inside you, they eventually crystallize into a soul. And so this is what Gurdjieff's entire system is fundamentally about. It's basically a chemical process or an alchemical process. It is about accumulating certain substances within yourself, then transforming or transmuting them through certain techniques. And if this is done intensively enough for a long enough time, it crystallizes and builds this soul in you. This something that can actually survive your physical death. Now, Gurdjieff does not just talk about the soul as if it's this one single homogeneous thing. He actually breaks it down into specific categories. You might think of them as being like the layers of the soul that you have to build one after another. And he calls them bodies, or the higher bodies of man. And so according to Gurdjieff, he says that us ordinary men, we have only one body. That is the physical body we know. However, he says that a complete man, a man who is perfected, a man who has gone through this alchemical process, he has no less than 4 bodies. And they all sort of fit within each other a bit like Russian dolls. And they are, number 1, the physical body, number 2, the astral body, or what's sometimes called the body of desire. Number 3 is the mental body. And number 4 is called a man's I, his individuality, or the master. And this is the soul proper. And it's only this 4th body that can be said to be permanently immortal. The astral body is relatively immortal, meaning it can survive a little bit longer than the physical body, but it will also eventually decay. The mental body can survive longer than the astral body. However, it's really only the 4th body, the master, what Gurdjieff calls a permanent and indivisible I, that can survive eternally, that is properly and fully immortal. In Tantric Buddhism, they refer to this 4th body, like I said, as the diamond body or the thunderbolt body. And it is said to be like a diamond precisely because it is indestructible. And so building a soul, becoming immortal, is a process of building and crystallizing these 4 different bodies within yourself, one after another. You first of all have to build the astral body, which again, Gurdjieff says we are not born with. And here he disagrees with a lot of popular occult or new age teachings today, which claim that, everyone has an astral body. Gurdjieff says, no, this is not the case. He says that most people who think they have an astral body and who might even write books about it, who go on all sorts of, astral projection mind trips in their own head, he says that these people are really just fantasizing. It's just self-hypnosis, in other words. It's auto-suggestion, imagination. He says that an astral body, like a soul, is possible to build, but that it is very expensive. It is very, very difficult. It requires enormous sacrifices. It requires putting yourself under and living with enormous strain and pressure for a long time, possibly for many years. It's like how a diamond cannot be created other than by undergoing tremendous amounts of pressure for billions of years. And the higher bodies are even harder to build and take even longer to build than it takes to build the astral body. So that's what we're going to be talking about here in this video, fundamentally. It is how to build and crystallize in yourself these higher bodies. The astral body, the mental body, and the diamond body or soul. But before I get to that, I want to bring this back to the title of this video, the original thing I opened with, which is how this relates to attraction and how when you do this, when you follow this process of alchemically changing yourself to become immortal, how this has the rather unexpected side effect of making women throw themselves at you, making them offer you casual sex. And I first became aware that this was the case when I began following Gurdjieff's system, and I noticed that this was an unexpected side effect, that when you are doing this work intensively, when you have built this astral body, or when you're in the process of building it, using these techniques I'm going to get to, it makes women significantly more attracted to you. And this is because the astral body and these other bodies have certain properties. We might compare these properties to things like magnetism or radioactivity. So, for example, it's a bit like how you can take a regular piece of iron and you can actually make it magnetic. You can turn it into a magnet by applying certain physical processes to it. And these transform that ordinary piece of iron. They give it new qualities, such as the quality of magnetism. You could then take that same magnet and you could apply other techniques to it. You could make it radioactive, for example. And so something like this seems to be what happens to you when you transform yourself in this way that Gurdjieff is teaching. When you possess these higher bodies, when you have developed them, they give off certain radiations, certain emanations, gives you a sort of an atmosphere around you, similar to the atmosphere around a planet. And this is perceivable by other people in my experience. It changes how they react to you. It is very, very noticeable. In my own case, I went from being pretty much invisible to women to having women throw themselves at me, flirt with me, and all but beg me for sex. Even in cases where we've just met, she barely even knows my name. So this quality of being attractive to women, literally attracting them like a magnet, like a kind of a force of nature, it happens as a result of this property that Gurdjieff calls animal magnetism. And animal magnetism, he says, is fundamentally a property of the astral body or the body of desire. This is because the astral body is composed of certain finer substances, things like what we would maybe call hormones or pheromones, certain electrical impulses and other quasi-material or substances, energies. And these substances give you certain emanations, rays that emanate from your astral body, so to speak, what's generally called your aura. And these things attract women. They make women notice you on a kind of reflexive level. You will notice that women are looking at you more often. They're staring at you. They're expressing sexual interest in you more often. These are the observable, and I would actually say empirically provable properties of this astral body once you have developed it. All right, so that's the basic framework here of how to become immortal and how to attain animal magnetism, both of which are really just two sides of the same coin. How it is fundamentally a question of building these higher bodies within yourself and how this gives you new powers, new possibilities that you did not have before. Now, the technique for doing this, and I'm obviously going to oversimplify this greatly, but it basically comes down to doing three things. Three specific techniques to awaken and to build and crystallize these higher bodies within yourself. They are: number 1, sexual alchemy or internal alchemy. Number 2, self-remembering. And number 3, self definition. And crucially, Gurdjieff says that you need to be doing all three of these at the same time. Doing one or two of these techniques is not enough. It's only when you do all three simultaneously that they constitute essentially the Holy Grail or the Philosopher's Stone, that they catalyze this alchemical process that creates and crystallizes the higher bodies within a man. So the first of these methods is what we can roughly call sexual alchemy. And this has to do with, again, what Gurdjieff calls food. So remember we said that there are three kinds of food: the food we eat and drink, which includes water, the air we breathe, and then our sensory impressions. Now, the food and drink we eat, this is metabolized in our body into finer and finer forms of matter, what he would call higher frequencies or higher vibrations of matter, through the normal processes of digestion and metabolism. So for example, you eat something fairly dense, like a piece of meat. It's then broken down in your stomach into its constituent proteins, vitamins, amino acids. Becomes finer and finer. It's absorbed into the bloodstream and converted into finer or higher vibration substances like hormones, neurotransmitters, and so on. And then the final highest, most refined, and high vibration substance created in the body from normal food alone is sexual energy. Semen, sperm, seed, and sexual energy is distinct from every other substance produced by the body in the sense that it has this sort of unique and magical quality in that it alone is able to create new life. Now, sperm can obviously create new life outside yourself in the form of getting a woman pregnant and making a baby. But if sexual energy is accumulated and conserved, Gurdjieff says that semen is also used to create new life inside the organism itself. And this new life is precisely the higher bodies that we are trying to build, starting with the astral body. And so that is the first fundamental technique that Gurdjieff says is necessary for creating these higher bodies. It is sexual alchemy, in a word, semen retention. Almost all of medieval alchemy, according to him, is really just a metaphor for this process of semen retention or sexual transmutation. In alchemy, they spoke about turning base metals into gold. This is really just a metaphor for this physical, internal, chemical process of converting ordinary food into the higher vibration substances like hormones, neurotransmitters, and so on, and ultimately into semen and sex energy. And then furthermore, it's about transmuting that sex energy into even higher vibration and more supernatural forms of matter, so to speak, all of which is ultimately done with the end goal of building and crystallizing these higher bodies within man, and in this way becoming immortal. That is what alchemy is all about. Now, as to how long you actually need to do semen retention to achieve this process, Gurdjieff is actually quite ambivalent about this. He says that some men will need to do it for a very long time, but not forever. In other men, he says that a long period of sexual abstinence is necessary to start the process of crystallization, but that once it's started, they don't necessarily need to remain abstinent. But then, to confuse the matter even further, he actually says that there are other men for whom a lot of vigorous, healthy sexual activity can actually help the process of crystallization of the higher bodies to occur. And if we look at how Gurdjieff himself lived, he seemed to alternate between these different extremes in terms of sexuality. He would go for long periods of being completely abstinent, living a very ascetic lifestyle by all accounts. But then he would also have periods in which he was fucking everything that moved. He fathered at least a dozen kids, possibly even over 100, according to some accounts. So, do you need to be fully sexually abstinent or not in Gurdjieff's system? And if so, how long do you need to be abstinent for? Well, Gurdjieff is essentially saying you're gonna have to figure these things out on your own, because not every man is the same. Not every man has the same genetics, the same constitution. One thing we can say with absolute certainty: masturbation is a complete and utter waste of these higher vibration substances. So at bare minimum, stop masturbating. Don't waste your sexual energy on fruitless and momentary pleasure, but store it up as much as you can and as often as you can, and use its energy to work on perfecting yourself. Sex energy by itself will also tend to make you much more magnetic to women, hence why anyone who's done semen retention for a few weeks or months almost always notices that women are looking at them more, they're more magnetic to women. And I've spoken at length about that in other videos, so I won't dwell on it here. Alright, now Gurdjieff's second technique for crystallizing the higher bodies and becoming immortal and magnetic is what he calls self-remembering. And this is essentially a kind of concentration technique, an awareness technique that Gurdjieff says we must know how to do if we want to awaken, if we want to actually ever be awake. Now, this one is going to take a little while to explain, but I'll do my best. So we said that to build these higher bodies, to build a soul, you need food. And we said that the third and highest form of food, the least dense form, the highest vibration form, is actually our sensory impressions. It's your sensory experiences. That everything you see, touch, taste, hear, smell from the external environment brings with it a certain amount of energy. It's like how you get nourishment from food, you get nourishment from air. Well, you also get nourishment from your sensory experiences, from your impressions, from everything you see and hear. However, the problem is, because we are what Gurdjieff calls asleep, because we're in a very low state of consciousness, we're distracted, we're not alert, we're daydreaming or worrying, we're lost in our thoughts, disconnected from our body. Because of this low state of consciousness we're in almost all the time, we're not taking in the necessary nourishment that we should be getting from our sensory experiences and impressions. We're generally getting enough of the first two kinds of food, which are food, water, and air, but we're being starved, completely malnourished, of the third kind of food, which is our impressions. Now, self-remembering is basically a way of extracting more energy or nutrients from these impressions. And when you do it, when you make it a habit, you very quickly start to observe a dramatic increase in your levels of energy. I've sometimes compared it to being like the real life limitless pill. So what actually is self-remembering and how do you do it? Again, a lot has been written about this. It's something you kind of have to learn by feel. It can't easily be explained in words, but I'm going to do my best here. The basic idea is to be aware of yourself at all times, to cultivate the awareness, the recognition, the feeling that I am. You know, in the Bible, Moses asks God, as the burning bush, for his true name. God says that his real name is I am that I am. And this has been said to express the deepest spiritual truth, which is that God is the awareness behind our conscious experience. It's the I am, the observer, the self-consciousness, self-awareness. And in the words of Aleister Crowley, every true name of God gives the formula of the invocation of that God. So, for example, right now, you're looking at your phone screen or your computer as you're watching this. That's a normal sensory impression, okay? And in a normal impression, our attention is going in one direction. It's going from you towards the object of your attention, which in this case right now is your screen. Okay, you're not conscious of yourself. You're actually literally in a state most times of a kind of hypnotic trance. When you're constantly absorbed by whatever it is you're doing or watching, when you're just running on autopilot, when you're not conscious of yourself and of your I, that's what Gurdjieff calls the state of sleep. This is a state of waking hypnosis throughout almost all of our day-to-day lives, and moments of waking up, of remembering yourself, are very rare. But these moments of remembering yourself, of becoming aware of yourself, it is only in these fleeting moments that Gurdjieff says we are actually truly awake. So that would look as follows, okay? So right now, you're still looking at your screen, you're still hearing my voice, but as you watch and listen to me, I want you to simultaneously be aware of yourself at the same time. So for example, what are your legs feeling right now? What are your hands feeling? What is your back feeling? What about your face? So run through and become aware of all the different parts of your body and what they're feeling and experiencing right now in this moment, like the tactile sensations, things like that. Now, when you've done that, alongside that, I want you to also cultivate the awareness that I am. I am feeling these sensations. I am listening to these sounds. I am looking at these things. And so now the arrow of awareness is going in two directions as opposed to in one. Your awareness, your attention is both going out towards the external world, but it's also going inward towards yourself. And this is the state of self-remembering proper. And so this is sort of an awareness exercise. You could think of it almost like a kind of active meditation. And you need to be doing this as often as you can as you're going about your life. And when you do, what's actually happening is that you're getting a higher quality of impressions because you're not distracted. You're not in your head. You're not being hypnotized and you're not identifying with various nonsense. Instead, you are awake. You're alert. And while you are awake, i.e. self-aware, you take in this greater quantity and quality of impressions, which is the highest vibration form of food there is. And with this much greater nourishment of impressions comes an enormous amount of new energy and power that we cannot get otherwise. There's nothing else quite like this. No other meditation or mindfulness technique creates the same results. This gives a very, very different taste. It's fundamentally a taste of greater power. You are filled with a strange new confidence. You know, it's actually quite similar to semen retention, if you've ever done that. Just like with semen retention, it can actually put you into certain states of euphoria almost. You know, when I first started experimenting with this, I had experiences that actually felt somewhat like being on MDMA, even completely sober in the middle of the day. It was actually very intense sometimes. You know, it's like you feel so happy that it can actually almost be uncomfortable. Again, I've compared it to being sort of like being on the limitless pill. That is basically what self-remembering is if you commit to doing it. And particularly particularly if you do it synergistically with semen retention. This is pretty much as close as I've ever come to finding a way of being on drugs without actually doing drugs. It can trigger you to have certain Satori experiences, pre-enlightenment experiences, and these are sort of like a taste of what's to come and what becomes more permanent and stable when you build these higher bodies. All right, now Gurdjieff's third and final technique for building the higher bodies, for becoming immortal, for obtaining magnetism and these various other supernormal powers is what I call self-definition. Now, Gurdjieff himself didn't actually put it in these words. He actually called this technique intentional suffering. It's a big part of his system. Together with self-remembering and sexual alchemy, these three things constitute the Holy Grail, the Philosopher's Stone. I don't actually like that term intentional suffering, however. I think it's unnecessarily negative. It's somewhat gloomy. It's kind of off-putting, I think. And actually what Gurdjieff calls intentional suffering is not really marked by a feeling of suffering at all in the moment when you're doing it. What he calls intentional suffering, this technique, is actually a way of achieving a feeling of joy and aliveness that cannot be obtained in any other way. And so I have come up with a new name for it, which I think is not only less negative, but also just more accurate. And I call it self-definition. Acts of self-definition, or the struggle for self-definition. And I'll explain exactly what this technique is and how to do it in a second. But the basic idea here, the premise of all this, if you remember, the overarching theme is that we do not have a soul. We are not born with a soul, but we have to actively build one. We have to grow one. We have to create one within us over the course of our lifetime. Only in this case do we have the right to be called a man in the full sense of that word. And until we do that, we are simply a slave to external conditions. Now, this soul we are trying to build, the diamond body, the I, or the master, what this is fundamentally is something that allows us to be independent of external conditions. And this is precisely what Gurdjieff says we don't have. As ordinary men, we are slaves to external conditions, to external forces. We don't have a permanent and distinct I that can be independent of and do what it wants regardless of external conditions. We only have a physical body, and this physical body and our emotions simply just react to external forces and to our environment. So, for example, I'm hungry, I have to eat right away. Stimulus, response. There's no autonomy, no will, nothing independent in me that can stand up to hunger in practice, or it's like I see a spider and I'm scared, or, I feel horny, I need to watch porn and jerk off right away. Like I'm an animal, I'm a machine. There's nothing in me that's able to withstand my external environment and the short-term emotions it produces. And so long as we are unable to be the master of ourselves, so long as we're unable to resist external conditions, to stand independently of them, we will simply be completely annihilated when we die, because there is no soul, there's no I. We don't have any permanent and independent individuality that would be capable of withstanding death. And so this technique of self-definition, what he calls intentional suffering, is fundamentally how you build that permanent and indestructible self. And you can only build it, in short, through war, through friction, through applying shocks to your organism continually, to continually waking yourself up, to waking up from the trance which we're normally in. And this is accomplished through internal struggle, through friction, through building your will by acts of defiance, by acts of self-definition. Or Gurdjieff sometimes calls this the struggle between yes and no. So in other words, your body, your emotions, they always want to do one thing, but in order to create this soul that can actually be independent of your body and can outlast it, you have to continually go against your body. You have to go against what is comfortable, against what feels natural and nice, against what you've become habituated to. You have to always go against what your short-term emotions want you to do. So small examples of this could be things like fasting, going for a period of time without food. So you're feeling hunger, you're feeling that intense desire to just fucking eat something, but you force yourself not to. And only in this way do you build a will. Only in this way do you create a something inside you that can actually withstand external conditions, that can be independent. Now, fasting is just one example of this. Another example of this might be something like semen retention or nofap. Particularly if you're in the habit of masturbating, then intentional suffering or self-definition would involve breaking that habit. By imposing that willpower on yourself, you are building that new body, the I or will, the soul, which can actually stand above and resist and overpower the downward pulling influence of the animal body. Other examples of self-definition or intentional suffering are anything you do to harden yourself, anything that's done to build discipline. For example, exposing yourself to cold when you don't have to, or to heat. It could be something like walking home for an hour in the hot sun instead of driving in a nice air-conditioned car. And importantly, these are things you do even when you have the option to do the comfortable thing, okay? So if you just withstand suffering because you have to, because that's what the situation entails, that doesn't really count. You only build these higher bodies when you are actively making things harder for yourself purely for the sake of doing this. When you are actively making yourself do things that are hard, uncomfortable, frightening, tedious, only these acts actually build the self, the soul, the I, the master. Again, it could be something like walking a certain distance in the cold, in the snow, or in the rain without a jacket. It could be emotional challenges, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, adrenaline control, doing things that are scary, like approaching a woman, for example, or standing your ground when another man challenges you, asserting yourself in some way that you're unaccustomed to doing. And when you do that, that feeling of adrenaline, that burst inside you of emotion, like, oh fuck, this is scary. Like, I really, really don't want to do this. Your legs are shaking. Then you just overpower it and force yourself to do it anyway. Those are acts of self-definition, meaning you're building a self. You're going against the flow of the environment. You're going against the flow of your body, against your short-term emotions. And only by doing that do we actually build a self or a soul at all. Only by doing that can we build the diamond body. This indestructible something in us that is actually able to stand apart from our physical body, from our emotions, from our external environment, and in this way is immortal, invincible, indestructible. So those are the 3 occult laws that you must follow if you want to create an astral body, a diamond body, a soul. They are sexual transmutation, self-remembering, and self-definition, or intentional suffering, the struggle between yes and no. When you do these 3 practices, you create an enormously higher quantity and quality of the higher vibration substances within yourself from which these higher bodies are formed. And the creation of these higher bodies, as well as the accumulation of those substances, brings with it the appearance in the organism of certain supernatural powers. One of these powers is magnetism, the ability to attract, to influence, to mesmerize and fascinate the opposite sex. Other powers appear to include things like telepathy, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, what the US military, in their experiments on these things, call psychoenergetics, which refers to mysterious and paranormal interactions that can occur between the psyche and matter. Gurdjieff's system and these 3 occult laws or techniques are essentially a blueprint to become supernatural, to attaining properties and characteristics of super nature as opposed to ordinary nature as we know it. One of these properties is animal magnetism. Now, I talk more about how to access these magnetic powers of attraction in my book, The Ultimate Guide to Making Women Approach You. I'm giving that away for free right now. All you have to do is click the link in the pinned comment below, and then you'll be taken to my website where you can download that book now for free. This book will teach you 5 secrets I've discovered for making women approach you. No matter what you look like, no matter how much money you make, no matter what age you are going to discover esoteric secrets of developing a personal energy field that literally makes women come to you. Since discovering these secrets, I now get approached by typically 2 to 5 girls every night I go out. Just 2 days ago, last Saturday, I was at the bar. This tall blonde girl approached me. We talked for about 20 minutes. She asked me to take her home. We go home and have sex. And so this is the sort of weekend, the sort of night that is pretty much just average for me now since I started doing these 5 things I show you in the book. So get that now. Click the link in the description. You'll be taken to my website. Then put in your email address and I will send you this free book to your inbox right away. When you do that, you'll also be subscribed to my email newsletter where I send you new exclusive articles from me almost every single day about dating, attraction, the occult, esoteric, psychology. The newsletter is actually the heart of what I'm doing online. Okay, these videos on YouTube are really just a bonus. So make sure you're subscribed to that. That's where I put out my best stuff, my most esoteric content. It's also where I can talk about more sexual or edgy things that I can't really talk about here on YouTube without being age restricted or demonetized. So do that right now. Click the button below, subscribe to the newsletter, and then you'll also get this free book, How to Make Women Approach You, no matter your looks, age, or money. Go do that now, and I will see you on the other side.